Welcome to another episode of Life After the Fire. My name is Chris Phelps. I'm your host. We are the preeminent podcast for all things related to having a great life after the fire service. I'm joined today by a good friend of mine, Mr. Jimm Walsh. Welcome, Jim.
Thank you so much for having me, Chris. I appreciate it.
So, little known fact, Jimm is largely responsible for us being here today. We'll go into Jimm's story, but you know, a couple years ago, we were sitting down, catching up, and over some tequila and tacos, and this crazy idea of putting out a podcast to pour into the next generation and future generations of the fire service. So, all right, Jimm. So tell us a little bit about what we're here for, and why do you think we wanted you on the podcast today?
I've been wondering the same thing myself. No, Jimm Walsh. I had a 20-year career at Winter Park Fire Department. I had a great career. I had a lot of involvement in the fire service and outside of just Winter Park, and I'm sure we'll talk about some of that stuff in a bit. But I
founder of what, vententersearch.com?
Yes, vententersearch.com, and that was actually a really cool thing. And I think about, Chris, I think it was 2004 when it started, to put it in perspective.
Wow. Okay.
So I ran the website for, I think, like 14 years or so. And then I was transitioning away from it because I was hoping to be the next fire chief, and I couldn't have a business relationship with somebody in the fire department.
Gotcha.
Again, with all of that, I'll probably get into it. But Vent Search was, so like, this was before Facebook was really a thing. I remember Twitter was just starting off, and there was no social media platforms for us to utilize and stuff at that time. But it was just a way to share a love for the fire service, which you know I have. And I've always wanted to pour into the fire service a little bit more. And I was very opinionated on truck company functions specifically. And so I created my own platform to stout, just to yell
Share.
from.
Yeah.
And it kind of took off. There were a couple people involved when we first started. An idea, we were just teaching at the local fire academy, and some other people, we were just starting it off, and they just wanted to, the problem was, the first day we had this truck company operations class, it almost took us, the four of us that were teaching the class, it took us about till lunch just to do our introductions because all we were talking about was ladder truck operations and our opinions about ladder truck operations and how the fire service in the area of the Central Florida Fire Service was missing the mark at that time. This was a while ago. Mm-hmm. Many departments were missing the mark anyway. And so we just wanted to create a way to start sharing this knowledge for the students. And within like the first month, it ended up going that people were from outside the area, that were not in the class, but just outside the area. I was seeing a lot of traffic from South Florida. I was seeing a lot of traffic from North Florida. And I'm like, how do they even find out about this?
Right.
Well, the fire service, there's no secrets, and people
started telegraph, firefighter.
Yeah. And it just blew up. And, it was a fun experience. And the really cool thing was, besides just having the website and a place to share the passion of it, it actually, I learned a lot. Everybody else was able to learn a lot and to
Mhm.
share ideas and that kind of thing. And then the really cool thing was it gave me the opportunity to go out and teach on the road as well. So I
Mm.
was teaching in person, lecture based at
Right.
first, and then eventually ended up doing some hands-on training, and the fire service just totally welcomed it, and it was an awesome experience, and I'm really glad that I did it. So
Yeah.
yeah, it went on for a long time
It's definitely
for sure.
a claim, one of your many, I'll say this, one of your many claim to fames. But from what I recall of the website, it became like a forum for input and conversation back and forth, tips, tricks, techniques, different ways of doing things, different tools that people carried in their, in their bunker pants,
Yeah.
so a lot of great information in a medium that hadn't really been utilized in the past. So, you're kind of a pioneer, I guess you could say.
Well, I just I had the pleasure to be kind of one of the first ones to do it, and I definitely messed it up along many times along the way, but we started to figure it out, and again we had some fun and shared some knowledge, and that was the best part.
Yeah.
And to your point, there were tips from all over, and it made me a better firefighter, and it allowed other people to become better firefighters, and it was set up so if you if you wanted to read this article or get something from it, you can, but you didn't have to. And it was just, it was a fun experience, but I was definitely glad to do it.
Yeah. So shortly after the website came out is when you and I got introduced together. We were working in neighboring departments, and
Right.
we both had a role or responsibility for providing training to our members. And I know that we collaborated on as much as we could at the time.
Sure.
And I don't know if you remember this or not, but I remember one of our famous lunch meetings, another one of our lunch meetings where, always we were always just kicking around ideas, and I don't know if you remember this or not, but um, our department that I was with at the time, the whole concept of vent enter search was kind of taboo. And
Sure.
I think I came up with the tagline for you to use. I don't know if you ever used it in a class, but the tagline was VES is not a 4-letter word.
So I did use that
Did you?
for
Awesome.
many years. And that was actually a class title that I ended up using
Nice.
along the way,
Take a
because
little credit for
because as you were saying, there were so many departments that, and this was, there were many departments at the time. I didn't come up with the name vendor search or anything like
Right.
that. I just capitalized it on it, and,
Yeah.
got the domain.
Yeah.
And I also ended up, real quick side story, one year at FDIC, there was a conversation about it. This was when the idea of vent, enter, isolate, and search came out.
Uh-huh.
And people were like, oh, I'm gonna buy that website domain. And I'm like, right there on my phone, I bought the domain and actually sent it right to vent enter search.
Yeah.
So I hope to this day, I don't know if this is the case, but hopefully Eric is still doing this. But if you type in vent enter isolate search.com,
Still
it
coming.
goes straight to vententersearch.com. So
Nice work. Nice work.
yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
Because a lot of departments were, it was the idea of that was kind of, for a lot of departments, it was ahead of their time.
Yeah.
And it's not that, again, not that we came up with it or I came up with it or anything, but I just broke it down and started sharing it in a way that made it more accessible, more achievable for a lot of other departments.
Sure.
And that's kind of what the website ended up doing. So it was a lot of fun.
And I mean, anytime new concepts come along in the fire service, they're it's always an uphill battle. And what do they say about the fire service? We're 200 years of tradition unimpeded by progress.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. And it's
or it's the other way around, right? It's 200 years of progress unimpeded by tradition, or
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it's one of the things I loved about the fire service, and it was
Uh-huh.
one of the things that challenged me throughout my career
Yeah.
because I always wanted things done perfect. I wanted it done perfect, and I wanted it done yesterday.
Right.
And as you know, throughout your many roles in the fire service,
Uh-huh.
two things you don't get in the fire service is perfect and yesterday.
Yeah.
And so it's
And I
I
and
thought
and and
some
I used to feel the same way, and my so that was my traditional thinking, and now my contemporary thought process, and the reason that we started this so quickly or fast track this thing once I said, all right, we're doing it,
yeah,
is it's anything worth doing is worth doing badly to just get started, so
right,
that's
yeah,
why we're here. Um so cool. So that's a little bit about our history of working together, a little bit about the things that you have done, with Vent Enter Search, and you already know some of the reasons I admire you so much is because not only did you have a love for the job, you were a student of the job, and not only were you a student of the job, but like you said, you took that all those hours of research and testing and planning, and you took all that, and you didn't just keep it to yourself. You went and poured into the next generation of firefighters, and
yeah.
that's why I've always admired you. um Now you touched on it at the start, that that your career kind of was cut short.
Yes.
So take us through. I know it's probably tough to talk about sometimes, and
Yeah.
but take us through what happened there.
Right. So I'll cut. Well, all right. So I was in my 19th year at the fire department. I was being groomed to be the next fire chief. I was the fire chief. I was the number 3 chief, and the number 1 and the number 2 chief were both in the drop. And we had had a 7-year long drop, so we knew that when it was going to happen and everything. It was set up, and I was in a pretty good spot for that opportunity.
And your department was
And
real big on succession planning, from what I remember.
yes,
Uh,
yes, and
so
so
you were being, and it wasn't a secret. You were being groomed to be the next guy. You were
yeah,
being
and
they
I
were
had
shining
some.
up 5 bugles for you.
Yeah, I yeah, which is kind of crazy to think about, but yeah, and
It's not
yeah,
all it's
so
cracked
I
up to be.
was.
Speaking from somebody who's been there, it's not all it's cracked up to be. But go ahead, go on.
Yeah. Yeah. At this point, I'm glad it didn't happen, but not because of the way it happened. That's for
Yeah.
sure. But so yeah, so I was in a fire department staff meeting, and I started to get a really big headache. And me getting a headache in a staff meeting was not uncommon, because I was constantly smashing my head against different obstacles, if you will,
Uh-huh.
not literally, but figuratively, throughout my career. And
Yeah.
so I started getting this headache, and I realized that it was a very bad headache,
Uh-huh.
and I can't remember exactly how quick this was happening, but I realized that it was so bad that I was going to need to get checked out after the meeting. And for a firefighter, this as
Yeah.
one of us to come to the conclusion that we're going to have to get checked out,
Yeah.
and actually go to the doctor, go to the hospital.
Yeah.
But again, I didn't realize that it was that bad at that moment. And again, I can't remember exactly how long this was. I think this was seconds, not minutes or hours. I think it was seconds. But then all of a sudden I realized, no, I need help. I need help right now.
Yeah.
And because I realized I was slumping over in my chair, and when I tried to call for help, and I was in this meeting, but nobody was looking at me, because somebody else was up there talking, and I was just a participant in the meeting. And when I tried to ask for help, it was just garbled. Nothing came out.
Yeah.
And again, I was slumped over at this point. So I knew what was happening. I didn't want to admit what was happening, but I knew what was happening. And when I finally was just very garbled and asking for help, people were trying to figure out what was happening. And people at first thought that I was just joking around.
Yeah.
And people at first thought, when the crews ended up coming up later, they thought that it was like a scenario, because they just thought it was me coming up with some crazy training idea.
Right.
I've been known for do those kind of things.
Yeah.
And but very quickly, they laid me down on the floor, and they realized very quickly what was going on. I had total, right side paralysis at that point, face droop, everything. It was classic stroke stuff.
And it was a hemorrhagic stroke.
What's that?
And it was a hemorrhagic stroke, no less, right?
Was it? Yeah, it was a hemorrhagic stroke. So that, I'll get to that part in a second. So, so I remember getting loaded up in the ambulance and getting en route to the hospital. And a couple of things I was very, very fortunate about the whole thing, Chris. I've been so fortunate with the whole thing. But what happened is within me trying to ask for help, they ended up calling it on the radio to get the crews coming and stuff like that. From that point, and I was upstairs in the conference room. Yeah. From that point, I'm down in the rescue, loaded up in 8 minutes. Mm-hmm. And then 4 minutes from that time, 4 minutes from Winter Park to Florida South at the time. Uh-huh. And I don't know how that happened. And, they called me in as a stroke alert.
Practically being teleported.
And what's that?
It's practically being teleported.
Yes, yes. And I can tell you this, Chris, to hear yourself getting called in as a stroke alert, that'll mess you up, man. I mean, I knew it was happening. And I was never a good paramedic. We could talk about that all day long, but I knew at least what was happening. Yeah. And when you hear yourself being called in as a stroke alert in an ambulance that you bought, I was part of the, I spec'd that ambulance out and everything, and helped. I, worked on that project and everything. Yeah. It was crazy. It was crazy to hear. Yeah. But again, it was, they stopped us in the ER just to make sure, and they got me right up to scan, and they ended up finding a pretty significant hemorrhagic stroke. And so I ended up going straight to surgery. And so from the time I tried to say help to the time I was in surgery was less than an hour. Wow. And so that almost, that's the ideal situation. Well, the ideal situation is don't have a stroke. Sure. Let's start with that one. But if you're going to have a stroke, being witnessed and being in front of a bunch of paramedics and being at the hospital that quick, that's how I survived it. But so they realized it was a hemorrhagic stroke. And so they got me prepped for the emergency, for the OR. And they removed a big part of my skull. I can still feel the divot where it was. Uh-huh. And they removed part of my skull, and they left my skull off for a couple of months. Wow. And then I actually had to go back to the hospital to get my skull put back in.
And so saved it for you.
What's that?
They saved it for you.
Yeah. So they actually, what they did was they put it in a bone freezer.
Oh, wow.
And when I got prepped when I went to go back to get it put in, the doctor goes, "Okay, I just saw your bone flap. Everything's still good. It's viable. So we're going to do the surgery the right way and everything." I'm okay, fine. And he goes, "So do you have any questions?" I go, "Yeah, doc. The guys at the fire department were telling me that they all signed it like a cast before." And the doctor didn't understand fire department humor. Yeah. So he's like, and he didn't know what to, and then he's like, I'm like, "Doc, I'm just joking."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Imagine that fireman trying to make light of a bad situation.
Yeah. Trying to make like a very bad situation. But, the recovery has been, so this was over 5 years ago. This is like 5.5 years ago at this point, which is just crazy for me to think about. The recovery has gone remarkably well, but painfully slow.
Yeah.
And, but the doctor, the guy that cut me open that day, never thought, well, he wasn't sure that I would survive because of what he took out of my head. It was the size of an orange. I don't know if I said that part before.
Wow.
And and right where it was right in the nerve center of the brain, the motor center of the brain. Sorry.
Mhm.
So I have some difficulty in speech. My word choices aren't there, and cognitively there's some difficulties and stuff like that. But a lot of stroke survivors can't speak at all, or mumbled speech,
Yeah.
whatever. And that's when we knew that I would be fine. When we realized that I could still talk, we're
Mhm.
like, Jim will be okay. And he might walk with a limp and everything. And the surgeon, and I think I may have missed this part, but the surgeon never thought I'd walk again.
Wow.
And so when I walked into I was in a wheelchair for a while.
Mhm.
And then I went in one time with a cane.
Mhm.
And I said something like, "Oh, when I come off the cane for therapy," and he goes, "Hang on." He goes, "I never thought you'd walk again." I go, "Oh, thanks for not telling me that earlier, doc."
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm sorry, I'm rambling at this
No,
point, but yeah,
yeah, man. I mean,
it's a crazy story.
it is a crazy story. And, and I watching you over the years and, and being an outside looking in on your recovery it's unbelievable, man. I mean, just from when we got back together, got, reconnected when I, moved back to Central Florida in 2018. So I guess you had the stroke in what, 2015, 16,
17,
17.
17,
So,
August 9th to 17.
so when we could reconnected in 2018, you were
Wow.
walking with the cane. Your speech was definitely still impacted. Um, but now seeing you is like night and day.
Wow.
So, you may not notice it because it's, what do they say? It's hard to see the picture when you're inside the frame, you
Yeah.
know, but, you know, looking from the outside, seeing your recovery, I think you're doing great, man. So
Thanks,
I,
brother. It's
uh,
that means a lot. It's it's definitely not something I recommend to a lot of people. But
well,
man,
so
it's
so one of the premises behind this whole thing was about careers that have been cut short, and
yes.
like we said, or I've said in the past, like I feel like my career was kind of cut short. No, nowhere near like this. Um, now, what is obviously there's you can focus on the cons or the negative impacts or the negative effects of a situation.
Right.
I'm sure we could talk about that all day, but
Yeah.
what are some of the things that you are now thankful for, or that you have an appreciation for, now that you're on the other side, you're on the you're living a life after the fire service.
Yeah.
What are some of those things that you have an appreciation, a better appreciation for?
Uh, so many. um, so the first is just surviving it.
Sure.
Just being able to be here to enjoy retirement and being here to enjoy my family and everything else. That's the most important thing. And I was so focused on my career, and I was so focused on becoming the next fire chief, and so focused on making a name for myself in the fire service and all these different things. Uh, I was always a family guy, and I loved my family, but I wasn't taking care of myself the way that I should, and I definitely could have made some better choices. So the thing that I'm the most thankful for is my family, because I remember, and Chris, this part is just crazy to even think about, but right when I was getting called in as a stroke alert, I remember very specifically thinking, how are my wife and kids going to find out, and what are they going to think? Like, what are they going to, what is their take? Like, how are they going to learn about this, and what's going to happen for them? And so I think I lost the total train of the question here, but that's exactly what it was all about. It was thinking about them and everything else.
Yeah.
That's what got me through to this point and will continue to get me through.
Yeah. Well,
But what was the question again? I'm sorry.
no, yeah, no. Well, I mean, it was about, what are some of the things that you have, have grown to appreciate
Yeah.
now, in your life after the fire service, and and from what I remember of our past conversations, something as simple as being able to take your kids to school and take them home from school, and how that you know had much more meaning and impact in your life than it ever had before it. you know
Yeah. I mean, that's a good, yeah, because I remember, I was so focused on getting them to school, like even because at that point, even when they were in daycare and stuff like that, I was so focused on getting them to daycare so I could get to work
right.
because I had to get to work and people were relying on me on work. That
Yeah.
was, listen to what I just said, Chris. People were relying at me people were relying on me at work.
Yeah.
But you know what? I was forgetting
Hmm.
that those two beautiful children, my beautiful wife, were
Yeah.
relying on me all the time.
Yeah.
And I almost missed that opportunity in life, So
Yeah.
yeah, but
Yeah.
just, yeah, even just walking them to school, cause that was a big part of my therapy. It was so important for me and it was so important for my kids to see me trying and working hard and all of that. And I just recently saw somebody at a social gathering and they said, "Oh, I've watched your recovery over the last couple of years." And they shared with me that they're a physical therapist
Uh-huh.
and they're like, they couldn't believe my progress over the years. And it's
Yeah.
like, wow, and it was just people that were driving their kids to school.
Yeah.
They kept seeing me every day, walk with my kids. And that's the most important thing, man.
Yeah.
That's it.
Well, I've always I feel like I've always kind of challenged you, um and I want to challenge you to to realize that you still have a gift, aside from the gift of survival from this thing. You still have a gift, you still have a ton of knowledge, you still have plenty that you can pour into today's fire service and to the next generation of fire service. And I want to challenge you to find a way, as I know you will find a way to achieve that.
Well, I appreciate that, man. It's fire service was so great to me throughout my entire career, and I love giving back to the fire service in any way that I can because it was awesome. I mean, and when my family was in the deepest need of our lives, everybody was there for me in tremendous ways, and it was awesome. And I'm so fortunate about that. And you know, as we've shared before, sometimes I'm a little cautious about overcommitting myself these days.
Yep.
But yes, I'm.
Well, you got your priorities straightened. You figured,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, yeah. Yeah,
so
because and that's the other thing is, and that you know my personality enough to know that sometimes when I go all in for something, I go all in, and I'm cautious about that sometimes, or I'm
sure,
trying to be cautious. It
sure,
doesn't work out so well.
yeah, yeah. One of the things that struck me that you'd said one of the last times, well, no, like 4 or 5 years ago, one of the things that struck me that you said um, was about maintaining a connection to the fire service, and that and that and that you felt that, or you didn't feel as welcome, you know not that you were unwelcome, but that you didn't feel
Right.
as welcome, stopping by the firehouse and
Yes.
seeing the guys, having coffee, just shooting the poop, whatever. Do you still feel that way?
um,
Because you shouldn't. obviously.
Right. Well,
You
I appreciate
shouldn't.
that.
And I would challenge, anybody listening to this from Central Florida, uh, you know, if they hear that, I mean, your phone's gonna be ringing off the hook. I know it. You're gonna be,
Well,
but it got me thinking, because now I'm down here in South Florida, and my old department, they do like a retiree breakfast once a month,
right.
standing, date, time, whatever, standing place, whatever. But it got me thinking about, all of the people, all of the contacts in my phone of people that I haven't reached out to in who knows how long, right? So I'm going to throw this concept out there. They talk about having a bro check, a brother
Yeah.
check in. All right, so I'm gonna throw a concept out there on how to do this, and for our
Okay.
listeners, if you guys are listening to this, you go into your phone and you see all these contacts you have in your phone, and it's probably been a long time since you've had a purge, whatever. Go through your phone and get rid of some contacts that aren't relevant to you anymore, whatever. But go into your phone, all right, and this is going to give you a way. I'm going to give you a way to reconnect with people that are in your phone, and do that bro check quarterly. So you pick whatever day of the week. For me, it's going to be Wednesdays. So on Wednesday, I'm going to start this next week. On that Wednesday, I'm going to go into my phone, and everybody whose last name starts with an A or a B, I'm calling those people. I don't know. I don't even know how many people that is, but I'm calling those
Right.
people that I've got in my phone, or, if they're not relevant anymore, I'm purging them. I'm calling those people to do that quarterly bro check-in. And that's what it turns out to be. If you do
Right.
2 letters a week, so A and B this week, C and D next week, and so on and so forth, all the way to Z, you will connect with everybody in your phone at least quarterly, and do that brother check-in,
Yeah.
because nobody should ever feel less than 100% welcome, you know, in your life still,
Yeah. No,
because
that is important. And I can tell you that there's one particular retiree. He ended up retiring just after, a little bit after me, Gary Mitchell, just a super solid guy. And he's always just made it a point to call me and set things up and just go out for, and I still obviously keep in touch with so many people because my, and that, but Gary, he'll set things up and he's like, oh, let's just go meet for a couple of beers or whatever. And then he'll end up putting it out there for a bunch of other people, and 20 people will show up. And I'm like, I thought it was just you and I. And it's just like, but so it's awesome because those connections are still there. But I like that. I like your idea about making it so intentional, because every time we have those things, or I'll see something, whatever, one of the people that I used to work with, and I'm like, man, I haven't heard from them in a long time. I haven't had that personal connection or that phone call. Mm-hmm. And one of the many benefits about being retired is being able to spend a little more time reaching out to people and stuff like that, because it's important, man.
Yeah.
Because once that, talk about life after the fire, your time in the fire service, man, but that fire inside is still there. And sometimes you just need that bro connection. You need that connection with somebody from the fire service,
brother or sister. I got to throw that out there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Of course. I didn't mean it like that.
For Victoria Devereaux, I got to throw that out there for you.
Yeah. She's doing great there. She's a lieutenant, and she's just saw her recently at an event. So unfortunately, and this is one thing I will say, is unfortunately where we're seeing a lot of other retirees and stuff like that is that funerals or memorial services. And that part needs to stop, because, there's people that we've lost already this early on in our retirements. And it's like, wait a second, I didn't get a chance to tell them how much they meant to me, or it had been a while since I shared,
Yeah.
fun stories with them or whatever. And it's like, wow, it shouldn't be like that. It doesn't need to be like that. And it shouldn't be like that. So
Yeah.
I like the intentionality of what you're talking about.
Yeah. And if you make it a, habit, you know, you'll get to have those conversations and, and catch up with people.
Right.
Um, funny, I learned that concept from a business coach as a way to reconnect with past clients. But it hit me recently hearing about that again. It just hit me like, why don't I do that with old
Yeah.
friends and coworkers and stuff, and so I was like,
Yeah.
you
I
know,
just recently was doing a station tour visit. My son is in Boy Scouts, and we were at a fire station, and so I was totally like staying back. Wasn't sitting saying, "Do you know who I was?" kind of thing or whatever. It was nothing like that at all.
uh-huh,
And a bunch of young people that I didn't know, whatever. I did recognize one of the lieutenants, but I couldn't remember where or how.
yeah,
And finally, the lieutenant came up and he goes, didn't you teach my rope class? I'm like, oh
uh-huh,
yeah, so we talked about things. And then he was sharing a little bit about my background with some of the other, active firefighters there.
yeah,
And one of the youngest firefighters looked at me and goes, you need to start coming for coffee. And this is from a different agency, Chris, somebody
yeah,
that I've never worked with, never, he goes, why don't you come stop at this firehouse and have some coffee with us from time to time? We'd love to just chat. We would love to just
yeah,
talk fire. We would love to just have you here. And I was like, wow, that's a part that they don't tell you about retirement when you retire, that can still be there.
yeah.
And you feel, unfortunately, you feel sometimes that goes away when you leave,
Mm-hmm.
but it really
It's all in
doesn't,
your head. It's all in your head.
It is all in your head. You're right.
It's
And
all in your head.
that's
I
a
do it.
shame. It
I
shouldn't
do
be
it
like
here all
that.
the time. I mean, I've been gone from the department down here for 20. It'll be 23 years this May or whatever. And
Wow.
and I stop by the stations, occasionally. Always seems like the same guy or a couple of guys are on duty, but it's like 100 and something, 150 man department, and
Yeah.
and I probably know maybe only like a dozen, half dozen
Wow.
at the most,
Yeah.
and they still all welcome me with open arms, and or they're being nice. They haven't kicked me out yet, so I'm gonna keep doing it until they do kick me out. But um, good stuff. So, man, I know we've touched on a ton of stuff. Um, I usually like to keep these to about 30 minutes. I think we're a little bit over,
Sorry.
but no, it's
You
totally
didn't tell me
cool,
that
man.
part.
I know it's totally cool. I mean, we got you and I have a ton of stuff to unpack, and this is obviously not going to be the only time that you and I are going to connect. But I always want to end these with a call to action, and I think I've already kind of mentioned it, but my
Yes.
call to action to you guys out there is, is yeah, go through your phone and set that weekly schedule, and reconnect with people that you haven't connected with in a long time, and and if it's some retirees, some old washed up guys like Jim and I, hey, invite us over to coffee, man. You have no idea how huge that would be. uh Little stroke of the, I don't know, it's not necessarily a stroke of the ego, but it's just to know that hey man, you are welcome here. Come on, come have some coffee.
Yeah. That's awesome. It's so important for the retirees, and I think it's also important that the young firefighters, and even everybody else, but the young firefighters need to see that as well. They need to see, they'll hear the stories about those people
Yeah,
throughout their career.
good, the
They need
bad,
to
and the
know
ugly.
them. Yeah.
So that's awesome. Well, and to our listeners, if you like what you're hearing, like, follow, and share. You can reach us at info at latfpodcast.com, info at latfpodcast.com. We'll see you on the next one. Thanks, Jimm.
Thank you.